So welcome back to the channel. I thought I'd do a quick video on the S1000XR. A bit of an update video, I suppose, because I've had the bike almost 2 years now, and I'm just about to click over to 24,000 miles on it. So I thought 2 year, 24,000 mile, that's the perfect time to give you an update on the bike, let you know what I think of it, let you know what I've done to the bike, what issues I've had with it, and I have had some issues with it, quite a few. Whether I've fallen out of love with it or not, and what my plans are. So yeah, here it is. Here's the S1000XR, and it's had a wash this morning, so it looks quite nice in its HP colour scheme. And it looks pretty much as nice as it did when I picked it up 2 years ago. So yeah, 2 years ago I picked it up from Barker's BMW in Preston, 0 miles on it. I was still a reasonably inexperienced motorcyclist at the time. I'd done about 5,000 miles on my Phaser 1000 since passing my test, but really I've built most of my experience up since then on this bike. I passed my advanced and my masters on this bike, got qualified as an examiner on it. So it does sound like quite high mileage, doesn't it? 24,000 in 2 years, but I use it to commute pretty much every day. So it's doing about 45 to 50 miles a day on the commute every day. On top of that, yeah, I'm an examiner now for the IAM, so I'm testing on it. I've been touring on it a couple of times, planning to go away again up to Scotland, hopefully a little bit later on this year with Andy, but last year we went down to France and Belgium. You can see the video if you look back through my old videos. We went through France and Belgium on the bikes. So it's been pretty much an all-rounder for me, and on the whole I have really thoroughly enjoyed the bike. So this is an S1000XR SE, which means it's got quite a lot of the, well, all the bells and whistles on it, I suppose. So it's got electronic riding modes, it's got electronically adjustable suspension, so you don't have to get the spanners out, you're going to take a pillion on it. It's got the quick shifter, or gear shift assist pro as BMW call it. So once you're on the move, gear changes up and down through the gearbox are clutchless, and it rev matches and blips and things like that. So the bike has the engine, pretty much the same engine as the S1000RR. So 1000cc 4-cylinder, tuned slightly differently in this bike, so I don't think it revs quite as high as it does on the RR, and I think it's tuned for a little bit more low down torque, so the power output's a little bit down. It's about 165 brake horsepower, but even so the bike weighs just over 200 kilograms, maybe 210, 220 kilograms, something like that. So as you can imagine, the performance is extremely strong, and we'll take it for a ride in a bit, give you an idea of the performance of the bike. So yeah, out and out figures wise, it's a good bike. It's a comfortable bike as well, and I'll talk about that when we go for a ride. That's one of the beauties of this, is it's got that sports bike performance, but it's a much more comfortable bike to ride, more upright riding position, but it still handles pretty well despite that upright riding position. So what have I done to it? Well, I've not really made that many additions to it. If I start at the front, I put some radiator guards on it. The radiators are there immediately behind the front tyre, so I put these sort of givey radiator guards on it. The radiator behind there looks pretty dirty at the moment, so that's probably ready for taking those guards off and giving it a good clean behind there. But they certainly stopped any stone chips or damage to the radiators. Put these eBay special hand guards on it. The black plastic handguard is standard on the bike, but I've put these clear sort of extenders on it just to keep the wind off my hands in winter. It does come with heated grips on it, typical BMW heated grips. They're either just not quite warm enough or hot enough to blister the skin off your hands. There's not really any in between. But yeah, so you can keep your hands nice and toasty warm in winter, and these keep the weather off them. This was quite a good addition actually. I found that the brake pedal was a bit small for my massive feet, so I stuck this brake pedal extender on it, and it gives me a lot more confidence with the rear brake. You do use your rear brake quite a lot when you're manoeuvring in slow speed and, you know, filtering and things like that, so it's nice to have the comfort that is your foot's not going to slip off the brake pedal, if you like. Anything else? Put a rear rack on the back here so I could fit my my sort of givey top box on there, so I can get a really good sized top box on here for commuting, taking my kit to and from work, things like that, and travelling as well, and touring. And I did get the Sat-Nav for it. The SE spec comes with the Sat-Nav wiring already fitted and the fixing kit already fitted. I have to say the Sat-Nav wasn't that brilliant, to be honest, and it broke down when I stopped using it. So what about maintenance? Well, you know, one of the things people warn you about with BMWs is that the servicing is quite expensive. I wouldn't say it's colossally expensive, but it's definitely not cheap. The service is very good from BMW dealers, and for all my servicing I've used Williams in Manchester, Williams Motorrad in Manchester. No complaints at all about the service I've had from them. The service intervals on the bike are 6,000 miles. So at 6 and 12,000 miles it gets an oil change, filter change, that kind of thing. Then there's a big service at 18,000 miles where valve clearances are adjusted and things like that. So that's a more expensive service, and then it's every 6,000 miles after that. So it is just due another service. It's booked in next week at Williams for its oil and filter change. I think it has an air filter change at this service as well at 24,000. General maintenance items, so tyres, I've gone through, I'm on my 4th set of tyres now on the bike. First 2 sets of tyres were the standard tyres from the factory, Bridgestone Battle Axes. That's what it was supplied on, and they were a good tyre. The first set lasted me just over 6,000 miles, but they were absolutely shot at 6,000 miles. They weren't illegal, but they were very close and very, very squared off. Obviously I do quite a lot of motorway and commuting and things like that, so the rear tyre especially had squared off quite badly, and just at the point I was ready for changing, I've got a puncture in the middle of Manchester, which forced the issue. So the bike went back to Williams in Manchester, had a couple of new Bridgestone Battle Axes put on it. That was the only tyre they had in stock at the time. So again, I got another 6,000 miles out of those, and then I decided to change and try a different tyre. So for the 3rd set of tyres, I changed to Michelin Road 5s, which is the tyres I've got on it now. And really these were a significantly better tyre in pretty much all respects. In the wet in particular, these are a really, really good tyre. They give you loads of confidence, but in the dry as well, the bike feels lighter. It sort of tips in and it turns just in a much more appealing way, really. It's difficult to describe, but the car feels much more up on its toes, much more accurate, and low speed handling as well. It feels fantastic on these tyres. And the other plus side of these is that the next set of tyres, that 3rd set, I got pretty much 10,000 miles. In fact, I got more than 10,000, but I got 10,500 miles out of them before they were squared off and ready for changing. So I've only just put this new set on, and I'm expecting to get another 10,000 out of these. They have a sort of mixed compound, so the centre part of the tyre is a harder compound, so it doesn't tend to square off as much. The outer edges of the tyre are softer, so that gives you more confidence when you're cornering. And for me, I mean, they're not a full-on sports tyre or anything like that, but I'm using this bike every day and doing big miles on it, so I want something that's going to last a little bit, and these are a really, really good compromise. So Michelin Road 5s. I know I go on about Michelin car tyres, especially the Pilot Sport series of tyres for road cars. I always recommend them. I don't get paid by Michelin, unfortunately, but same recommendation for these Michelin Road 5s. Thoroughly recommend these tyres. So I'm on the 4th set now in 24,000 miles. About right for a bike, that. And I think 10,000 out of the last set was pretty exceptional, really. So I'm quite happy with that. It's had brake pads on it once, so about 14,000 miles, front and rear brake pads were changed. I did the rears myself, had the fronts done on a service. Relatively easy job to do that. And the chain and sprocket. So a lot of BMWs are shaft drive, all the flat twin bikes are shaft drive, aren't they? But this is a chain drive. So the original chain and sprocket that came on the bike, I'll be honest, I don't think BMW invested much money in the chain and sprocket that they put on this bike. Must be to keep the cost down. But it lasted about 10,000 miles, and at that point, you know, I like to check the chain tension every couple of weeks, give it an adjust if it needed to. But at 10,000 miles, there was nothing left to adjust. The chain was short, and it was ready for changing. And the sprocket, the teeth on the rear sprocket has started curling over. So just over 10,000 miles, I put this aftermarket chain and sprocket on. They've been fine. Actually, and lasted another 14,000 miles. Now, just noticed a bit of a tight spot on the chain last week when I was adjusting it, but nothing significant. Keep cleaning it, keep it well lubricated, and I think I've got another few thousand miles in this chain and sprocket before I change them, so I'm quite happy with that. And then we come on to some of the issues that I've had with the bike, and this is where, you know, if I was going to really have a go at this bike, this is where it starts, because this has not been the most reliable bike, I'll be honest. The first sort of semi-serious issue that I had with the bike, well, first of all, first 12 months it was okay, no real issues. The only things that I'd replaced under warranty were the mirrors, and honestly I must have had 5 or 6 mirrors on this bike now. What happens is that the glass starts rattling inside the case. Both of these are fine at the moment, but both mirrors I think have been replaced twice. I think one of them might have been replaced 3 times. I'm sure I've had 5 mirrors on it so far under warranty, but honestly we can live with that, and it was actually the dealership that pointed that out to me. I hadn't noticed it myself, so not too bothered about that. But at about 12,000 miles, the bike, I'd gone away with Andy, and we were in France, and we were halfway around the trip to France. That's just where you want to discover a problem, isn't it? But we noticed a few drips. Just a stain coming out the bottom of the water pump here, on this area, and down on the side of the exhaust. So the coolant needed a little top up. I probably put less than half a litre in it, but give it a little bit of a top up. That got us the rest of the journey around. And then, coincidentally, I suppose, on the way back, I stopped at Knutsford Services of all places. So we'd go all the way back from Belgium and France, stopped at Knutsford Services, stretched my legs for 5 minutes, and then the bike wouldn't start. The battery was flat. Which felt wrong to me, really. I'd not been off the bike really for the last 5 days. You know, I'd done a couple of thousand miles. There was absolutely no reason for it not to be charged up, but the battery was jiggered. So I ended up getting the bike recovered to Williams in Manchester. They put a new battery on it. They also replaced the water pump and the exhaust manifold. So never really quite got to the bottom of what the issue was with the exhaust manifold, but that was about, I don't know, 1,200 quid's worth of work, something like that. It wasn't a cheap job. I think it was the headers and this first part of the exhaust here that they changed. Whether it was connected with the water pump issue, whether it was a separate issue or not, I'm not sure. But that wouldn't have been a cheap fix if the bike wasn't under warranty. While the bike was in, they lent me another bike. That's always been the case with Williams. They've been great. Always had a nice new bike, something with a fairing, something that I can use on a daily basis. They had the bike for about 3 days, and then I got it back good as new, all good. Then we fast forward a little bit to January this year. So the bike had done about 19,000 miles, 20,000 miles, something like that. Maybe just over 20,000 miles. And a couple of mornings, starting it up, before I put my earplugs in and put the helmet on, I noticed that the engine was ticking. It was putting out quite a loud ticking noise, a tick over, and that ticking noise went up and down with the revs of the engine. And I think the first time it did it, it eased off once the bike had warmed up. The second time it got louder and louder, more obvious, and then I could hear it with the helmet on and with the earplugs in and everything. So bobbed it down to Williams for them to have a look at. Their first thought was it was a cam chain tensioner. So they lent me a bike, they lent me a nice brand new 1250 RT. So I felt like I was back in the police again, riding a big white RT around. Anyway, they changed the cam chain tensioner. There apparently is a tighter tensioner that they can put on the cam chain tensioner, and that made no difference at all to the bike. So then it had a complete top end strip down, and what they found was that the camshafts were worn. And this really surprised me, really. It's a modern BMW, it's a high performance engine, it's designed and built, to a very high standard. So it was quite surprising, really, to find that the cams had worn. So, I had a chat with them about it. Turns out that there's a manufacturing fault, a manufacturing issue. It has cropped up with a few of these bikes. There's a few videos over YouTube of people who've had camshaft issues as well. And it's some kind of issue in the way that the metal on the camshafts is case hardened. So yeah, some issue with the way that the camshafts are case hardened at the factory, and the case hardening, the heat treatment, whatever it is they do to the camshafts to make them hardware, and just hadn't worked, and the camshafts were worn, and that was what was causing the ticking noise. So the bike then had a complete top end rebuild. New cams, new valves, new followers, springs, chain, tensioner, probably somewhere in the region of £2,500, close to £3,000 worth of work carried out, all under warranty. No quibbles at all about having the work done. No arguments about it. But that's quite a concern, isn't it? You know, a bike of this cost, not a cheap bike, and of this performance, worn camshafts at just over 20,000 miles, not the kind of build quality that you'd expect from BMW. You know, plus side being that I got a good service, got a loan bike, and everything was fixed free of charge. Now, the issue for me now with this bike is that when I bought it back in June 2018, they came with a 2-year warranty. So the warranty is about to expire at the end of next month, around about the end of June. So I've got a couple of choices. Do I swap the bike, chip it in for a new one, or do I extend the warranty? Now, in all other respects, I'm really enjoying this bike. Love the experience of riding it. It's a lovely everyday thing to use. It's a nice thing to own, nice to just clean and tinker with in the garage, etc. I love the colour scheme, and the new XR's out now, but it's, you know, the colour scheme's a little bit duller, and I can't see that it's a huge advance over this particular bike. Power output's the same, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not massively tempted by a new one. It's going in for its service next week, so I might just take the new one out, the new version of the XR out for a bit of a test ride. Might even take the cameras, see what we think of it. Maybe I'll change my view then. But I think at the moment, and with everything else that's going on, I think we'll probably definitely keep this bike. I think we'll probably keep this bike for the next 12 months. Keep on top of the servicing and extend the warranty, because there's one thing that I would not want to do is own one of these outside warranty, not with the amount of work that I've had done on it now and the cost of those repairs. Yeah, admittedly that's BMW's cost, and it's BMW parts and all the rest of it, and you could run one of these, you know, yourself and service it yourself, I'm sure, with no massive issues. But this is my everyday bike. I need that reliability. I need the sort of comfort blanket of a warranty. So yeah, we'll definitely be extending the warranty, and then I'll give some thought to swapping it, but it'll probably next year, I would have thought, before I swap this bike. So what else can I tell you about it? Fuel economy. It's got a button on the handlebars that sort of scrolls through your trip meter. I scrolled through it the other day. I've never ever reset the fuel economy, and it's done 43 miles to the gallon over 24,000 miles. I don't consider that to be particularly bad for the performance of the bike. Some of the other things I really like about the convenience of some of the settings on the bike. So if I want to take Mrs. Local out on the back, really it's just press a couple of buttons here to adjust the preload and adjust the damping, so you're not having to get the spanners out and tinker about with it. That's very handy to be able to do that. And rider modes as well. I'm a real fan of the different rider modes. So the bike's got sophisticated stability control, wheelie control, ABS, traction control, all that kind of stuff fitted on the bike. And there's 4 riding modes. So the first riding mode is rain. So whenever the road surface is wet, damp or wet, stick it in rain. I think that's the only setting that tones the power output of the engine down. I think it drops it to about 100 brake horsepower rather than the full 165. But it really gives you full stability, traction control, keeps the bike really stable, and those systems cut in nice and early, keep you safe on the bike, so you're not spinning the back wheel up or you know, getting in danger of losing control of it that way. The next setting up is road. That's just an all-round general road setting. You've got the full power output of the bike, the full performance. The exhaust a little bit quieter, so the valves remain closed in the exhaust, so it's not popping and banging. Then you've got dynamic mode, which is on a day like this and when the road's dry, that's pretty much what I use the bike in. Dynamic mode, you get a sharper throttle response. I think you get more of the bike's performance earlier for sort of slightly less turn of the wrist, and it opens up the valves in the exhaust. You get that popping and banging on the overrun, that kind of thing. It's not massively antisocial, it's not a ridiculously loud exhaust, but it sounds quite nice. And then at the top end of those, so the fourth of those settings is Dynamic Pro, which really winds all the systems down. It'll allow the bike to wheelie and gives you an even sharper, more dynamic throttle response. For me, that's probably more of a track setting, not something that I use really on the road. I tend to stick with either dynamic or rain. Those are the two sort of sweet spots for me. And it's got cruise control as well. So cruise control was something I never thought I'd ever use on a bike, to be honest. Now I've got it, I probably use it every day at least once. Very nice in situations like 50 limits on the motorway, where it's very easy to let your speed creep up if you're not careful. You don't want to be constantly looking down at the speed on a bike, so it's nice to click the cruise control on and let that just control your speed without risk of it running away with you. And it can, you know, even the most experienced motorcyclist will tell you the bikes are quick. A very tiny turn of the wrist will increase your speed very quickly, so cruise control is quite a nice thing to have on the bike. So that's the ownership experience, warts and all, good with the bad. Let me tell you what I really love about this bike though, it's how it rides. So let's take it for a ride, and I'll talk you through the riding experience. So here's the thing about this bike, I absolutely love how it rides, and not just when you're riding it quickly, because it is a very, very quick bike. The first thing you notice when you jump on it, and the first thing I noticed when I test rode one of these, was how comfortable it is, certainly for me. Now I'm 6 foot, but I'm a bit of a funny shape. I've got quite short legs, so I've got a long body and short legs. I'm like a dachshund. And until I got used to the bike, probably the first 1,000 miles, I found it a little bit of a stretch. I still can't quite put my feet flat on the floor, just slightly on tiptoe when I've got the bike stationary. But it didn't take me long to get used to it. They do a lowered version, but a friend of mine recommends against that. He's got that, and he reckons that the saddle's a little bit uncomfortable really. They've taken some of the sponge out of the saddle, amongst one or two other changes to the bike. So the recommendation is, if you can manage the full height XR, that's a better bike to have. Like I say, as soon as I got used to the bike, and ever since, I've been totally comfortable with the height of it. And it's an extremely comfortable bike. I've sat on this for 8-10 hour days when we were touring down towards France and Belgium. No problem at all, I wasn't aching in the saddle. Your legs are a little bit higher up than they would be on, say, a GS or something a bit more touring orientated, so you know, you get a little bit of an ache at the hip joint after a few hours, but 5 minutes off the bike, quick walk round, and it all feels good again. It's certainly much more comfortable than being hunched over on a sports bike on your wrists and on your arms. And then the low speed stuff, the low speed handling of this bike is lovely. It's got a really nice, easy way about it. I suppose part of it is the wide handlebars. It's very easy to manoeuvre at low speeds. Keep your feet up. Just manoeuvre it with the throttle against the back brake a little bit. But it pootles around, and that's where you can, you know, that's where bikes can be quite difficult, isn't it, when you're pottering around at low speeds. But this bike is really, really easy to handle, easy to push around as well, moving it around the garage onto the drive and stuff. You know, 200 odd kilograms, it's a fairly substantial machine, but it's nice and easy to move around. But then we get on to the bit that I love most about this bike, and that's the performance and the way that the engine performs. So 165 brake horsepower, red lines at about 11,500 revs on this engine. I know it red lines higher on the RR, but in this it's 11.5. And believe me, this thing really goes. Get those revs round, and this bike is as up on its toes as I think pretty much most sports bikes. Keep it in the low ranges of the rev range. And it hurtles you towards the horizon. So if you're in the mood for a good blast, this bike is always up for it. Power delivery is pretty linear really. There isn't a point where you think, oh, all of a sudden the power's coming in. That's the beauty of a nice 4-cylinder sports bike engine. But when you do get the revs around past about 7,000 or 8,000 revs, this thing really does want to move you along the road. It's lovely. So I'll just click cruise on for a second there. I will talk about the bike's handling. I'll describe how I think the bike handles, but I think you've got to just take this with a Bit of a pinch of salt, because I do not claim to be any expert in bike handling, but I'll give you my description of how the bike feels in the corners, and I'll let you make your own judgment off that. So that's the little, with that little proviso at the start. So on the normal riding, you know, trundling along a road like this, staying within the speed limits, the bike is almost telepathic really in the way that it turns into the corners. I'm making such tiny movements on the bars and such tiny movements with my body just to move the bike into the corner, just to lean it in. I don't really need to give any thought to it, and I've never been in a position with this bike where I've been uncertain as to what it's going to do. It's very communicative, particularly when you've got the dampers in the stiffer setting and the more dynamic setting, and you've got the engine in the dynamic setting. The bike communicates with you really nicely. It's quite a long travel on that front suspension when you press the brakes. The brakes, I should say, are extremely good. A very sophisticated ABS system on it. Brembo's on the front. It's got a BMW branded caliper on the rear. The rear brake isn't up so much, but it never is on a bike, is it? It's just to balance that out during under braking. But if you give it a good squeeze on the front brakes, this bike really stops. As far as the handling is concerned, you know, at these sort of steady away speeds like this, it's just very comfortable. I sort of feel like I'm steering it almost from a slight movement to my shoulders. Sort of move my shoulders to the left and the bike tips in very gently. But what about handling at speed? Well, let's take it on another road now. Let's get the bike moving through the corners with the revs a bit higher. And let's see how it handles slightly higher speeds. Still on the road though, still with a margin of safety. So I'm going to look for the opportunity to overtake this camper van in a minute, and then we can move the bike along a little bit on this road. So I'm holding back in a nice 2-second following position, getting a view down the near side to start with. And that near side view isn't giving me enough view to go there, keeping that near side view. Bit of local knowledge, I know that the road bends around to the right at the bottom of the hill here. Might be an opportunity coming out of the dip. In fourth gear at the moment. When I start looking for that overtake, I'm going to just click it down into third. Third will give me plenty of performance. Third gear now, I'm looking for a break in the lines. There's the break in the lines. There's the opportunity. Quick shoulder check. And let's get the bike moving along now. Third and fourth gear. So it pulls like a train at those higher revs. So offside position here, let's see how it tips into this corner. Off the revs, down to third gear, and I'm counter steering the bike in, just pushing down up the left hand bar. Nice and steady, looking through the bend, keeping it in third gear. Again, just the bike tips in. This bend tightens up a bit, but when it does, the bike just reacts nicely. Just shove that right hand bar down a little bit more, and I'll roll up into a following position on the bike in front. So centre line position, roll it into this bend, and we're only rolling the gas on once the bike's settled into the corner. So yeah, at higher speeds, this bike handles beautifully. The bike is certainly better than me, so I never feel like I've thrown something at this bike that it's not capable of taking. I always felt like it's got a bit more in reserve. It's almost like the bike's taunting you. Come on, I can take more. Come on, I can take more than that. So that's my thoughts and my ownership experience of the S1000XR. If you've got one of these, share your experiences in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Future plans then, well, I think like I said before, we'll probably extend the warranty on this. I wouldn't want to own it without a warranty on it. But I'm probably not ready for changing it yet, so I'll likely keep it another 12 months, I think. But definitely extend the warranty on the bike. Then what should I look for? Well, very, very interested to try the new XR. It is ground up, it's a different bike apparently, so I'll be interested to try that. I'll try and share that experience with you on the channel.
Or should I try something else? Can you suggest anything else? I mean, there's other BMWs. That RT I borrowed for a week was a nice comfortable cruiser, but not quite the bike I'm looking for at the moment. GS is a big seller, and I've tried GS's and the new 1250 GS, which is a cracking bike, but again, not really my style of thing at the moment. Should I go away from BMW, maybe try the same style of bike that Ducati make? Is it the Multistrada? How would that compare with this? Maybe some other sports tourer style of bike? Well, let me know what you think in the comments below. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm going to try uploading content as often as I can, both bike and car. So if it's car stuff that you're here for, I haven't abandoned you. I'll be doing some car stuff soon. But thanks for watching for now, and we'll see you next time.